markets from an oil and gas perspective is that when I joined the bank around about 17 years ago, there was pretty much only Nigeria, Angola were producing in our markets. Things have changed dramatically over the years. We've got new oil producers, Uganda coming along, Namibia looks like taking FIDs this year, and on the gas side, we obviously have material markets such as Mozambique, Cote d'Ivoire, Petroleum, and of course Ghana as well started producing that joint. So very much Africa's our home, we drive for growth, and the oil and gas sector and also the mining sector, mining and dark is happening in Cape Town at the moment, is really at the core of the development opportunity for Africa. These are some of the transactions we've worked on. Most of the big things that have happened in the continent in the last few years. Pretty much every single Mozambican transaction, Nigeria LNG. In the last year, we worked on NGRC's financing, and we also very recently closed the acquisition of Excel here in Nigeria. So huge credentials. And bringing it right up to speed, I'm advising the first LNG import terminal in South Africa, which is intended to unlock gas to power there. So let's get on to the content. If you remember one slide today, this is probably the single most important slide. This is our world in data from when I was born in 1975 until the end of last year. And what you see from the graph is that global total energy supply does not dip. You see from the graph that there's only two tiny periods where there's been a small dip. One was the aftermath of the GFC in 2008, and the other one was, of course, COVID, where essentially forced restrictions on mobility led to a drop in energy demand. Other than that, energy demand only increases. So from an energy lens, let's ignore politics for a second. There is no such thing as the energy transition, there is only an energy addition. More energy is required each and every year in normal sets of circumstances. And what we can say with absolute confidence is that in the year we're in now, and in the next 2 years, more energy will be needed as well. So to give you an example, the US government's short-term energy outlook has US electricity demand increasing 3% next year. That is a huge number by historical US standards, and obviously by global implications, it means the world is going to need more energy. You have data centers, you have AI. What happens in America normally happens in other places with a time lag. So the strong likelihood is that more energy is going to be needed in Africa. Just to put a couple of numbers on it, what's known as fossil fuels remains about 86% of the total energy supply, and gas is about 26%. This is probably the second most important slide, and it's why we're here as a bank and why someone like me has been in Africa for 18 years. And this is a graph. It's also our world in data, but what we've done, you'll see this on LinkedIn the whole time, but what we've done here is we've stripped out most of the countries, and we've left it with just Africa, BRICS economies, and the G20. And you see quite clearly there's a huge correlation between GDP per capita and also energy poverty. Most of our countries in the bank network are in the bottom left-hand corner, the blue, obviously low levels of GDP per capita, low levels of energy consumption, and as you see, what's known as the more successful countries in the world are towards the top right. So our mission and our goal and events like SAIPEC is very much to take Africa from the bottom left-hand corner of the graph towards the top right. And what you see here is a very interesting dot for those of you who have fantastic eyesight. I don't, by the way. And if you look at where India is, India, in terms of GDP per capita and energy consumption per capita, is pretty much the same as Africa. So India, with 1.5 billion people, as it starts to get more prosperous and grow, it will consume more energy. And that will have an inherent feedback loop onto the graph I just showed you before, which is the global energy consumption. Let's have a word about LNG. LNG is obviously very familiar to the Nigerian audience. You've had Nigeria LNG, which is one of the most successful projects on the continent. But LNG on the whole is rapidly changing. So LNG is about, natural gas is about 25% of global energy supply. Within that, LNG is about 16%, so only about 3–4% of the world's supply. But LNG is extremely important That's because it goes from energy-long countries to energy-short countries. And that business model has also been changed by what's happened in the US as well in the last few years, where a major country has become an energy exporter. It's not just a Qatar or a Nigeria exporting energy. It's also in Australia, it's the US, so LNG is really breaking through. The significant thing about LNG is how fast growing it is. It's the fastest growing sector of global energy outside of renewables and batteries. So to give you an example, LNG demand 2 years ago was 411 million tonnes. It ranges between 411 and 415, depending on which metric you look at. Last year it was 430. At the moment, there is about 220 million tonnes of LNG under construction. So that's more than 50% of the LNG market globally last year. And that is only going to accelerate and continue. And what this means is that around the world, lots of new projects will start to take FID, new technologies being used. Floating LNG is a good example, and the panel will talk about that. But what you also have is a number of new markets going to buy LNG for the first time. So as I mentioned, I'm advising on the South African project. At the top of the continent, Morocco has a big scheme, and even markets such as Australia will be importing LNG at the same time as exporting LNG. So this is LNG in Africa. Most people don't know, but actually an African project was the world's first LNG project. Algeria sold some LNG to the UK all the way back in the 1960s. Africa has about 80 million tonnes of operational LNG. Things are going to change dramatically though. So if you look at the map, the map is starting to be filled out. Senegal became operational last year. Mozambique, which I'll talk about in a second, is on the bottom right. But the big themes coming forward, as well as Mozambique, floating LNG is a big one. And what you're going to start to see is the democratisation of African energy. This is really linked to technology. So on the export side, floating energy is making a big impact. You've got projects in Gabon, you've got projects in Congo, Brazil, Mozambique. But on the import side, FSRUs, FSUs, tanks and small-scale LNG will make an enormous difference going forward. I'm going to start in East Africa and finish off in Nigeria to tee up the panel. Let's talk about Mozambique. I've been on Mozambique since 2012. It is an enormous series of projects that is often not well understood by the rest of the world. There have been some challenges in terms of onshore force majeure caused by insurgency, but the fundamentals are unbelievably strong, and Mozambique continues. The core fundamental of Mozambique is its geographical location. It is only 9 days one-way sailing distance from India, 1.5 billion people. The gas also has no indigenous CO2, and Mozambique is non-aligned politically. So the expectation is Mozambique will carry on growing. So you had 3 projects that taken FID. The Total Mozambique LNG project came back. That means you have 20 million tonnes of LNG under construction. The one to watch out for is Rovuma LNG, an ExxonMobil-driven project which is expected to take FID at the end of this year. If it does, Mozambique will be producing 38 million tonnes of LNG by 2030. That is more than Nigeria. And what will be very fascinating over the next decade will be the seesaw between Mozambique and Nigeria's LNG. So there was a situation for a few years ago where Mozambique was expected to be number 5 in the world, Russia was going to be number 4, things have changed. So Mozambique will go to number 4, and it will overtake Nigeria after Train 7. But then the big question is how many LNG projects in the floating kind will Mozambique build, as will Nigeria build, plus Train 8, Train 9 we talked about yesterday, and then how many more phases of Mozambique LNG there could be. So you could have a situation where Nigeria and Mozambique are each around the 40-50 million tonne mark in the late 2030s. So it's extremely exciting. I don't want to say rivalry or battle, but the pursuit and the chase that both countries will do to try and become a leading energy exporter. What's also interesting in Mozambique is the scale of African markets it can sell to. At conferences, I tend to refer to Mozambique as potentially becoming the Norway of East Africa. So for those of you who don't know, Norway sells electricity to 6 European countries, gas to 5, and by our count, Mozambique can very easily sell power to 11 countries. Just a brief mention on Tanzania to the north. The Tanzanian site is only 240 kilometres from Mozambique. The general expectation that we have is that after Mozambique fully recovers construction this year and ex-ante FID, Tanzania LNG will start to make some progress. The host government agreement is key here. Once it's built, you have about 15 million tonnes of development. Moving around the dance card, we come to South Africa. South Africa probably has indigenous resources. Before them, it's going to need to import energy. The thing that's interesting here is the scale of the gas to power requirements in South Africa. So the country has about 40 gigawatts of coal-fired power, and the government's official plans are that about 17 gigawatts of gas-fired power is needed by the late 2030s, and the first 2 gigawatts steam has been launched. Then you come to Namibia. Namibia is probably the most exciting upstream destination in Africa at the moment. It's early days, lots of resources have been found. The first oil FID will take place this year. What we generally expect as a bank is that probably Namibia will start to move towards 500,000 barrels or so of production by the early 2030s. The interesting thing is gas. The resources are very deep, in some cases are far offshore, as far as 300 kilometres. So we expect Namibia will lead with oil and follow with gas, exactly the same as Guyana in the Caribbean. But the expectation we have is that Namibia will also produce floating LNG by the early 2030s. Then we come to Angola. Angola is a really interesting case of the dangers of delaying gas development. And I know Ed is speaking on the decade of gas next. So Angola peaked at about 2 million a day of oil. It's down to about 1.1 million a day. But other than Angolan LNG, which is 5 million tonnes, Angola did not develop its gas. So what happened last year was they published their own gas master plan, an extremely impressive document. We commented on it with the government. And Angola has about 30 TCF, 30 TCF of stranded gas that needs to get out of the ground. So Angola needs gas to power, it needs fertilizer, it needs small-scale LNG. It will probably also expand and increase Angola LNG. So lots and lots of opportunities to go ahead. And finishing off with West Africa, Ghana has been producing oil for about 15 years, as was mentioned on the panel yesterday. Associated gas. One of the challenges of Ghana is really the decoupling of timing between oil development and gas development. The infrastructure is now starting to be in place, but it has really lagged probably a few years of what it ought to have happened. And very interestingly, Ghana has a mixed infrastructure development. You have public bodies, Ghana Gas Corporation, GNPC, involved in gas infrastructure, but you also have a private company, Gensa, also involved in gas infrastructure. Then we come to Côte d'Ivoire. This is probably the second most exciting greenfield market after Namibia. E&I have made major discoveries. The Bellany fields, 2 phases of oil and gas are now operational. The third phase is expected to take FID soon. And they also have a Kalau gas development, which is probably going to lead to floating LNG. And then just to finish off and tee up the Ed speech and then the panel. Nigeria, where we are. I'm not going to talk in detail through the map or the next slide, but the broad theme of Nigeria is that you'll just see from the map visually that the gas infrastructure of the country is not yet complete. You have lots of thick red lines. These are the existing pipelines, many of which, such as Elbs, are starting to be full and need augmenting. But you also have some dotted lines. These are the likes of AKK, OB3. These will start to really fill out and deepen the country's gas infrastructure. And what you also see from the south is that you have various floating LNG projects under development. So just mentioning a couple of themes before Ed comes on. Clearly, the big theme you all know about is the need to increase oil production. It got down to 1.2, it's now consistently past 1.5, and obviously there are plans to increase it. Similarly, gas production, 7.5 BCF a day. There is still some flaring, there is still some leakages, but the gas master plan has the intention to get production up to 10 BCF and then beyond. So what are some of the issues? Clearly, pricing for gas needs to be sorted out. Is there going to be a role of subsidy? Are we going to move towards the Nigeria parts of the value chain, upstream, midstream, downstream. Things can't work exactly in tandem, we know that, but in our opinion, there needs to be an iterative development where all the different parties start to grow their businesses, and it needs very careful budget management. The power sector is clearly an issue. Bad debts need to be solved, the transmission network needs to be expanded. I'm just going to finish off with two quick points. The first one is the challenge of African gas, and it's important when looking to develop or financing African gas, as we do, to realise the challenges. And the big challenge of Africa, when we look at the rest of the world, is that Africa is warm. So around the world where gas really takes off in the Northern Hemisphere, around 30% of annual demand is in the heating sector, whether it's residential or whether it's businesses, hospitals and so on. That demand is just simply not there in Africa in theory. So because it's not there, it means we all have to work extra hard in terms of developing the other areas. So gas to power becomes even more important in the African context. Also gas to industry and gas to transport. And then just my last point before handing over, the gas master plan was published a couple of weeks ago. Extremely important document, extremely impressive document, which a lot of work has gone into, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that on the panel as well. Thank you very much.
Just take this to the audience when we're done. Thank you, Papa, to right. Thank you. Thank you for everything. The gas need for Standard Bank. Interesting, the competition that is coming on the African front with LNG, in spite of our 37 that is going to come on stream anytime. Or Paul, you wonder if the FLNGs coming in Nigeria would help us increase our ton per year to match Mozambique? Interesting. It was the late President Buhari who said he thought we should have been at 12 right now. So maybe before, story for another day. We'll move on. Well, thank you, please, Paul. Give him a round of applause. Thank you very much. Well, many other countries, as he said in his presentation, are beginning to come out with their own gas master plan, but we've had that, and we've released quite a lot of documents now. And a couple of years ago, we did mention about a decade of gas, from the year of gas to the decade of gas, and now we're working that decade of gas to see that by the time we get to 2030, we would have increased infrastructural development in this sector and increased gas assets as well. One man is overseeing all of this, coordinating all of this on behalf of the industry and the government, and he will be our next speaker. Please welcome Mr. Eko, the director at the Decade of Gas Secretariat.
It's slightly different from oil because you need to plan it from end to end. To make sense of what needs to happen in that sector, you need to connect the pillars of supply, demand, infrastructure, pricing, capacity building, and there are also, for Nigerians, two key areas that we must address. One is the power sector, specifically the other is cooking gas for millions of Nigerians in their homes. And decade of gas, that's really what we sort of focus on. How do we increase supply? Where would the demand sectors be that will take the gas? What infrastructure needs to be built? What is the right pricing for gas that connects all of this? And how do we make the power sector and cooking gas sector work without robustly? We spent 50, 60 years predominantly as an oil country. Now we're sort of retooling for gas. So there's quite some work that needs to be done around building the right capacity for gas. So basically I'll set each of those pillars. What you see is just how last year looked like. Very early we started our production numbers somewhere around 6.8, 6.9. By the end of the year, we were somewhere around 7.4, 7.5 BCF a day. Lots of things happened in between by various people. But we did, looking back last year, that this was a relatively successful year for gas. That's probably why you see the minister and the president here when we started. On the supply side, I think we're very concise. To increase Nigeria's gas production from the current 7.5 BCF to 12.6, there are 20 big projects that we need to come on stream. Some of those projects are onshore, some are in shallow water, some are in deep water. What you see there is that when you see the stars and they are green, it means that those projects have taken FID. Stars spread out past FID. We're expecting a couple of FIDs in 2026. The big one that we are looking at for Q1 is the IMA project. In 2026 also we're looking at AMI. We're looking at AMI to bring on stream the Tubu project. This is the gas supply roadmap. So when you had GCO unveiling the NNPC gas master plan, this is where he gets his 12 BCF number from. These are the key critical projects that all the stakeholders have agreed they're going to unlock and they're going to bring the additional volumes. Last year, you had Shell take FID on HI, you had Total take FID on Beta, you had Shell talk about the selling. This is being tracked on a quarterly basis. This slide is owned by NUPRC, so I'm looking at GENS. Where the operators say they want licenses to be extended, he needs to extend them. Where they say they need new incentives, to put that straight to the SS office to engage the right relevant people to put that in place. Whatever local content, waivers are needed to make some of these projects happen, NCDMP is on the table to make sure that it happens. So all the stakeholders are aligned to make this chart work. What you see then on the right is there was a period of gas production decline, but we are beginning to go back up. So if you look at that chart in 2023, when we had a new president, and we also had a substantive Minister of State, Petroleum Resources for gas, there has been increased focus. 2023 was also when we set up the Decade of Gas Secretariat officially. But the picture there is that we are back production-wise towards the 2021 levels. What you will also notice is that for the first time in Nigeria's history, domestic production has now crossed the 2 BCF per day mark. That has not happened before, and I've been in this sector for over 25 years. I think that is an important message because remember when Paul made his presentation, we always need to look at what's happening domestically. I believe exports is a big potential. It will continue to address itself, but the work around nurturing domestic supply requires a lot of work from any person who looks at the domestic gas obligations to any person who looks at the demand infrastructure that is needed to consume the gas locally. We must not keep our eyes off flaring. We want to increase Nigeria's gas production, but at best, we want flaring to remain flat or at least reduced. So when you look at the gas flaring percentage, there have been years when it reduced, there have been years when it slightly increased. But we are hoping that working with NUPRC, we will get a firm decline profile underpinning gas growth and flare numbers remaining either stable or declining. So where will the gas go to? This is the evolving map around the demand side. When we look at what we call the harmonized demand database, some of the projects sit in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, some sit with NNPCL, some sit with NUPRC, some sit with NMDPR, some sit with the SS office. There are about 215 projects with various sponsors that sit on the gas utilization and demand side. So we did a virtual conversation. Each time you do that round around who is a serious project sponsor, you will notice that the numbers keep reducing. So from 215, we came down to 75. Today, there are about 57 to 60 projects in what we call Wave 1 that we want to see if we can support them to take FID and get to first gas in the 2030 window. Those 57 to 60 projects present an additional demand of about 6.5 BCF. So you can see that we're currently at around 8. You put 6.5 on top of that to get up about 14.5. Then we are in the right place because demand is then slightly ahead of supply. And that's what we want to be, because gas cannot wait for demand to materialize. Demand will always be slightly ahead of supply, and then we know that we are chasing value and chasing the money in the bank. The most important picture and message I want the audience to take away is that power constitutes the biggest percentage of domestic consumption, about 11%. I know we had Paul talk about FLNG. You will also see that when you look at the overall picture, Nigeria's FLNG map, we believe, is also going to change, while the number of projects are lining up in the FLNG space. This is that chart presented in a more sectoral format. Where we are today, you can see that we expect 8 BCF a day to sit in the domestic side and about 7 BCF to sit on the export side. That is the picture we want to create come 2030. Nigeria is consuming more of its gas than it is exporting. You can see the FLNG slide. We don't have anyone yet today, but we expect that to quickly ramp up. The next slide just shows a list of all the various projects. You know, I spoke about the 57 to 60 projects that will come on stream. This is fully aligned with the NNPC gas master plan, slightly more than what you have in the gas master plan, because the NNPC plan is a subset of the overall country picture. But this is very dynamic. It will continue to evolve as all the critical stakeholders engage with the project promoters, NUPRC, NMDPRA, NCDMB, the Decade of Gas, the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum Resources Gas. They are having these conversations to be sure that each project is moving at the pace that it needs to move to work in line with the 2030 picture. On the demand side, I always like to say that when you talk about Nigeria, we need to remember that on the eastern side of the country, we have a big GPI plant, the Indorama fertilizer plant that sits under the Indorama petrochemical plant. It is the single largest urea line in the world. It's the single largest urea production line in the world, in the Indorama, and it sits on the east. They've just commenced production on train 2, and you would see additional gas is now flowing from SAIPEC to begin to fuel the second line. But if we also then cross to western Nigeria, we have the Dangote fertilizer plant. It is the single largest urea manufacturing plant in Africa and the second largest in the world. Why am I saying this? Because sometimes we do not realize the amount of infrastructure and investments that have already been in place. And this is in Nigeria. 2 big fertilizer manufacturing plants that they don't rank locally, but they rank up there in the global space. This is why we must get as much gas to them as is required to keep them producing. Of course, I won't spend time and talk about NLNG. Today, taking between 2.7 and 2.9 billion cubic feet of gas per day. By the time train 7 is completed, it will add an additional 8 million tons per annum. At its peak, LNG usually contributes about 9% of global LNG supply. These are big projects. They are situated in Nigeria on the demand and midstream side. We are working. Our focus is to be sure that these prized assets of ours, that we continue to nurture them and ensure that they work, they grow, and they provide Nigerians with jobs and feedstock to drive the manufacturing sector. Someone needs to build the pipelines that would take us from the predominantly southern lines and begin to open up the north. Today, a huge part of that work sits with the Nigerian Gas Infrastructure Company, NNPCL subsidiary. And you will see also that this is fully aligned with the NNPC gas master plan. To create the map you see on the left, we currently think that you will need $22 billion. Will we build that map by 2030? Likely not. By working with NNPC and NGIC, we are committed to deliver 16 infrastructure projects you see listed on the right side of that slide. Already, 4 of them are in construction. The AKK pipeline, we believe that will be completed this year. The ELS line compressors, which provide improved pressure across the whole of the network, the compressors are already in country as at the end of December. We expect them again to be operational this year. The OB3 River crossing that connects the east and the west. Again, there is a 2026 target to get that out of the way. And then there is an expansion project around the Escravos and Odidi area that would allow gas to flow from Odidi and additional gas to flow from reservoirs onto the Alps. That work is ongoing. It will take us into 2027 before it is delivered. But that is our first part of the top part of that chart. On the lower part, I start from the bottom line. Today, Nigeria gets gas as far as Ghana. We intend to get gas as far as Senegal, and we're going to use the African Atlantic Gas Pipeline, an extension of the WACP line. Next month, we're sitting with the World Bank to discuss potential financing options to support energy of that project. Paul, again, this is another area that Stanley wants to sort of sit in. But that line is important because what it does is that it allows Nigeria's gas to circumvent West Africa with a potential chancellor to cross into Europe if needed. So a critical project, we're working to see if that can be delivered as a. There's also an EOS line that will bring additional gas into the Lagos area. That's also being worked. There is a line that will now bring gas from the Seplat facility in SAIPEC, former ExxonMobil. One line will increase supply to NLNG. Another line will bring the shallow water gas supply into PIT and take it into the southeast. So there, we want to land a line at Obibo, we want to land a line at Umoria. We need to begin to see how we build the viable distribution network in the southeast that then also still feeds the OB3 and the AKP. So lots of work going on there. I think we call that bucket of infrastructure, the TNGP lines. But these are the 16 projects focus that we're trying to work with NNPCL to ensure that that infrastructure map begins to sort of build out. What we're doing now is asking the NGIC and any other person who wants to be a sponsor for the project, what do you need? Technically, commercially, finance-wise, and also security to ensure that all these projects are then being executed and are delivered within that time frame. Yeah, we always talk about the price of gas. So there's a confidential work going on with NUPRC and NMDPRA to build bottoms up what is the right pricing for gas. We hope that work will be completed in time before the NMDPRA announces the domestic base price for the year, I think on the 1st of April 2026. So there we're getting the cost numbers from the producers, their view on what it takes to align all the costs. That goes to NUPLC